Welcome everyone to this week's Cat's Eye on the Future. This week, I had intended to do a longer show on ghosts and other seasonal paranormal topics, but every time I tried to start preparing for it, something kept happening to get in the way. Finally, I realized I had this nagging feeling that what I needed to do instead was a check-in reading on the energies for the month ahead. Since October 31st is the traditional New Year in the Celtic calendar, and along with the time when the veil between the worlds is very thin and communication with the unseen world is easier, it was also a time that was considered very good for divination. Now, I'm recording this on October 23rd, so we're not quite on the 31st yet. But this time of year was a season as much as it was a particular date. And I'm supposed to be at a large public ritual helping to light the ancient Samhain fires on top of an Irish hilltop where it's been done for probably 3,000 years on the 31st. So I thought that going ahead and taking a look at the cards and runes now might be a good idea, even if it's just a tiny bit early. Besides, after years of doing this sort of thing, I have realized that when you feel a gentle push or even a stronger knock to do something, provided it's a good and helpful thing, which, a reading would be, it's usually a good idea to follow through on it. So perhaps I will revisit ghosts, ghoulies, and things that go bump in the night on another show. That's always a fun topic. But for now, let's look at what the cards and runes have in store for us for the next few weeks. Now, I pitched the question this time to cover the month of November specifically, but left it open to include the last bit of October too. My deepest sense is that there are energies that are emerging now, and they're going to be in the background in our lives for a few weeks to come. They may not even end on November 30th, but this is sort of what the month has in store. The way I phrased the question was, what are the most likely energies and or events the cards and runes wish to flag for us coming up, especially from October 31st through the end of November, but which may be starting as soon as the show airs in late October 2014. So we've got that sort of as our time parameters. Now, I'm looking at these cards and runes that I have before me, and one thing that stands out overall, that is the issue of potential money and economic problems. I think there may be some other issues as well, especially in terms of power and the control of power, and maybe potentially even military defense. But that said, I want to now take a look at each card and run them individually by everyone so I can tell my listeners a little bit about them. We can look at the individual pieces and then pull it all back together to see how it makes sense and where I come to this conclusion. The first card is the Prison card. This card shows a man in shackles and chains sitting in a cell behind bars, with only a tiny barred window to provide some light. If you've listened to my prediction shows in the past, you know that the first card is the card that sets the tone for the reading. It tends to be one of the most important cards. In fact, it really provides the main theme. So, the main theme of this reading is basically being trapped. Someone or something trapped, held in prison, unable to get out, unable to move. And there's also just a certain sense of hopelessness that you can gain from looking at the lonely chained figure in this picture. I don't always get it that strongly, but this time I really did. There is a sense of hope on this card with light coming through the window, but the prisoner is just so despondent they have turned their back away from it. They're not even looking at and taking comfort from it. So overall, this alone is just a time period where the general energies are stuck, unmoving, bound up. In other words, this is what I call an inactive energy period as opposed to an active one. This isn't always a bad thing. We need slower times to balance out the really fast-paced ones. But this one has a trapped feeling rather than a restful one. Sometimes, it's sort of like taking a break. This time it feels like something's being blocked. This feeling is made more intense by the second card, which is the Cave. The Cave is a dark, gray card, which shows a human figure huddled on the floor, holding their head down in their hands, miserable and despondent. Again, they are facing away from the light that he's actually there at the opening of the cave, as if they are intentionally avoiding the light and hiding in the darkness. Again, this card isn't always bad. No card ever is. The cave card can represent an intentional withdrawing from a difficult situation, taking time out for yourself and to gather your energy back. It can be something like the healing time for grieving when someone passes or someone you love, has to leave. There's a natural desire to kind of get away for a while. It can even be as simple as sort of hiding in your cave and keeping your head down until a crisis that you have no control over sweeps past you and you can come out of the cave again. But most of the time, this card actually is about depression, sorrow, grieving, loss, dejection, and fear. The card is gray, and so are the feelings around this card. Taken together with the prison card, it suggests to me that November will be a rather gray, dark month where things feel rather close, trapped, and unmoving. I have a hunch the weather in the northern part of the globe may reflect this as well. Again, I get this overall feeling of sort of a gray, foggy gloom. The next card is the Castle Tower, and it thankfully has some brighter aspects, but it's still concerning in the context of the other cards. The card itself shows a tall and mighty fortress built on a hill, ready and able to defend and protect those inside, and keep out threats that may wish to do them harm. The sense I'm getting here is one of both positive protection, but also one of over-defensiveness or a feeling of being on the defensive. For various reasons I'll get into in a moment, the first two cards seem somewhat connected to a dark economic period in the run-up to Christmas. The Castle card actually feels more about real physical defenses, almost as if people, tribes, and nations will be perceiving some sort of threat or various threats, and they just want to put up strong defenses against them. I also get a really serious sense that people will be sort of on the defensive in general, even at the personal level, kind of quick to take umbrage at real or imagined slights, and just like jumpy, as well as feeling somewhat depressed and trapped. In other words, people are just likely to snap at you at the office or at home. Kind of be aware of this and try to be kind to them when they do, because it's just very much in the air to take offense at things. The really good card we have in the side card grouping now is the Union card. This is a lovely card of two beautiful streams coming together to form one river with a silver cup beside it. It's the Lover's card in this deck, and it's often about romance or good working partnerships. In a current events reading, it can often flag countries or organizations that have the word union or united in them, in their current or former names, for example, the United States, the European Union, or the former Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. You also can flag things like companies like Union Carbide, or actual unions like the Teamsters might come into play. I'm feeling especially drawn towards the EU here for some reason, perhaps a bit of Russia, the former Soviet Union as well. It may be some of that cold, trapped, and defensive feeling coming about as some of the Western Europeans realize that they and we, since I live in Ireland, may be trapped a bit over the situation of the heating gas that Russia provides. It's kind of being held hostage by the situation in the Ukraine. A lot of Europe, even much more so than even just Ireland. Ireland is not that dependent on it, but there are countries like Germany that are highly dependent on the pipelines that come through the Ukraine, and Russia's not real happy with a lot of what's going on, and they are somewhat holding that gas and oil pipelines hostage. I also sense that there's some money tied up in all this somewhere that may affect both sides of the Atlantic. I think it's partly that Russian situation, but there may be something else going on as well. It just feels complicated. It feels energy related in some way. Now, the defensive castle card also concerns me because I keep seeing pictures in my mind of things like battle tanks and other military equipment moving. It doesn't look like it's firing a lot. It's more like pieces being moved into position. It's like old films of the Cold War almost, but I'm not sure that that's where they are. I'm not seeing a location. I'm just seeing this kind of various, again, that kind of defending position, like I need to get ready for something. And it's not quite there yet, but it's moving. The final side card is the message, which tends to just make the card before or after it much more intense. It's as if to say the reading is the message, or sometimes I say, this is the message. Which is the other reason I'm concerned about that prison trapped cave depression castle defensive union combination, because this just sort of magnifies it. But we're not finished yet. So let's look at our two cat cards next. So actually following the message card in the way I usually do the pattern, we have the kitty strength card, which is a tiny kitten facing a very big dog. The kitten is not afraid, and the dog does not harm him. This card suggests the best way forward is not to adapt a position of attempted intimidation when faced with a conflict, but instead to meet it steady and face on with calm and steady strength. I mean, you don't underestimate the problem, but you don't try to bully your way through either. This card is a great counterbalance to that sense of defensiveness, but again, it brings more images of conflicts, battles of wills, and just plain general disagreement during this time period, all of which may very well come to a standoff given the prison card. And it may also result in depression, both emotional and economic, as everyone sort of looks for a way out and isn't really seeing one. It's just kind of, again, standoff, trapped feeling. The Six of Kitty Pentacles is a wonderful picture card. I love this card. It's got a farmer's hands milking a cow, surrounded by 6 barn cats, each hopefully awaiting their turn at the milk bucket. The card symbolizes a growing return to prosperity after the austerity that would be signaled by the Five of Pentacles, which isn't showing up in this reading, but would be a really good card to use to describe the recent periods of austerity in the European Union, or what they call the Great Recession in the US and North America. The thing about this card is that while it shows that things can improve, it also shows that the improvement is not actually in the hands of the barn cats themselves. They have to wait about until the controlling hands of the farmer, and that's all you see are his hands on the card, who will then get to decide if he's willing to share the milk with them or not. He usually does, but will he do that? We don't know. The write-up on the cards is about getting what you deserve to get, but not more than your portion either. I got kind of a sense of karma in this one, getting what you deserve in that sense, but also a warning about overreaching on the part of some, demanding what is beyond what is rightly owed them. I think this may manifest both in terms of money or property, but also in other forms of entitlements. And I sense that this is going to break out not just in one group, but it's going to be kind of an overall trapped feeling. It's going to cause all sorts of things to break out across many levels of society, this feeling. For those on the bottom rungs, it may be people demanding a greater share of prosperity or money. Unions may play a role here. And it's going to go all the way to the very wealthy feeling entitled or feeling like they're being gypped in some way and of getting more than what they already have. You're going to have mega corporations in particular, and some governments may feel the need to try to play go and grab during this period. It could even be with nations, things like territorial disputes and things like that. And again, not all these things are individually wrong in and of themselves, because people may actually need something. Maybe they're not getting their actual piece of the pie, but it's this general overall feeling that's pushing all levels and everyone to think, I'm not getting my fair share and I want to take it now, basically, is the feeling I'm getting. The prison card is probably going to trap some of the physical attempts and make them impossible, but it's not going to stop the underlying energy to want to do so. And that may kind of be waiting there for when the energy is on block and they could strike out. And I think this may be possible towards the end of the time period. I didn't actually quite see that in the cards, but I have a feeling about that. You have been listening to part 1 of Cat's Eye on the Future. We'll return to the show right after these short messages. Do you have questions? The cards have answers. If you would like a personal reading with Melody, just go to my website, melodipsychicreadings.com. That's Melody with an I, psychicreadings.com, for information, or email me at melodyreader@gmail.com.
Readings are available using Skype, phone, email, or even in person if you are lucky to live in Ireland. Why not find out what special messages the cards have just for you and book a private reading today?
We now return to part 2 of Cat's Eye on the Future. Finally now, we have the runes Fehu and Gabo, which is why I have suggested that a great deal of this reading is about money, economics, property, unions, including the political ones I mentioned, and contracts. Contracts between people, contracts between businesses, just contracts in general. Fehu is the rune meaning cattle, gold, or wealth. It's a sign of prosperity in the old sense, but also a hint that there could be conflicts over gold, sex, fertility, etc. For fertility of the crops or a good harvest in animals were a very ancient form of wealth. So you want to kind of watch commodities, the harvest, and livestock during this period as well as other things that may be affected when we talk about the economy. It may not just be money. Now, I've mentioned this before for new listeners to my show, but my husband has described Wagner's ring cycle as basically 8 hours of a definition of the Fehu rune. In other words, 8 hours of fighting over the Rheingold treasure itself and various mixes up among sexual partners that make things even more complicated and create even more battles and even more conflicts. With our union card among the Psi cards and the prison cave cards as well, the appearance of the rune Fehu seems to me to take on the edge of trapped money, burying the wealth in the cave, and perhaps conflicts among unions. On top of the union card, our final rune is the marriage rune, Gabo, or gift. In some modern northern languages, this rune is still the root word for marriage, and it represents both the partnership of spousal contracts, but also the giving of gifts between the bride and groom on their wedding day. This was an important part of the Germanic wedding ceremony, as was the economic contract set up between the families. So you're dealing with economic commerce here. You blow this up on a worldwide scale, along with everything else in this reading, and you see why I think money, economics, methods of exchange, gift-giving, and even international treaties and unions may become rather trapped, muddled, or defensive, leading to an outcome where no one really feels satisfied or that they're getting, quote, their proper share, unquote, of whatever the outcome is. Now, the Strength card does suggest, there's light here, that one way out, along with the Six of Pentacles, would be if everyone could just sit down and agree to an actual fair and balanced outcome, giving everyone something of what they want, but probably no one edging out in a total victory either. However, the prison and cave castle cards together, with the potential for conflict over money and the Fehu rune, suggest this outcome is not likely, at least not during the next 6 weeks before the end of November. And I'm going to frame that there because I want to keep that hope that, we have this possible solution presented in the cards, maybe a way off yet, but that would be one kind of way out. Now, I'm not going to come out and predict something definite like a stock market crash, because at this point, what people call the markets is so over-manipulated that it's anyone's guess as to what they really mean when they go either high or low. But I will say, as I did on the very first day I did a public blog reading and card prediction, and suggested that if there was a day when the stock market could fall, this would be it. And it did somewhat. It wasn't a great crash, but it was enough that some people noticed, and I even got linked to a few economics forums. This is a time period like that when a serious stock or other type of economic correction or collapse could potentially take place. I'm not an economist, so I don't know exactly what trapped money or money hiding in caves actually translates to in real life economy speak. But those are the images I keep getting in my mind. This is likely to be in tandem with some rather defensive measures and talks going on, some of it military, some of it more in the political realm. It all seems confused and mixed together. Monetary unions are certainly going to feel these effects, like the EU or other places that are sort of locked in, possibly the whole dollar thing, I don't know. if anything serious takes place, but again, the image of trapped money keeps floating up before me. I also sense this growing feeling of dissatisfaction with how things are, and a feeling on all levels of society that quote-unquote my personal portion of the milk bucket is not correct. And that's just going to be a strong energy for many people, along with the idea that there are other forces in control. In other words, the farmer's hands. That's almost like the unseen hand of the market, only I picked that phrase because that's what it made me think of, but it's like these unseen farmers' hands that seem to hold power and real control of the money, economic, and political situation. This does not mean that this is actually true, that there is an unseen hand of some sort, though there could be, and not just of the markets, but this sense of someone manipulating it. But this is how it will be perceived on many levels of society. Just who people think the farmers' hands are will vary depending on their personal, political, and economic situation and outlook, their social level, their political beliefs, etc. But during this period, I think it will simply increase that sense of powerlessness, trapped, depressed feeling, or rather, a lot of people are going to feel like that little kitten looking up at a great big dog and wondering just what's about to happen next. The good news is, as always, individuals have choices. And if you know the energy during a certain time period, you can take steps to work with it and work around it in your own life as things come up. Knowing this is a time period when things are going to happen that are rather slow, unmoving, withdrawn, and defensive makes this a great time to work on your inner life and things that you can control, while at the same time just keeping your head down and trying to avoid that which you can't control or do nothing much about anyway. This is a really good time for taking care of the home, both his cave and his castle, your spiritual as well as your physical home. Remember, caves were the earliest forms of home we had, and castles one of the most defensive and protective ones. So you have a great image there if you choose to concentrate on that part. It's a great time to practice psychic warding and shielding, both because you want to protect your spiritual home as well as your physical one. And you can also, in the physical, look for things like checking your fire alarms, putting up storm windows, your family protection plan, that kind of thing. It's great for that kind of thing. On a personal level, the union message may be a strong signal that your protection is in the union with those that you do love and trust. A time to depend on your family and your closest and truest friends. A time when those bonds maybe would help give you strength to face a big scary doggy, even to unite together to make sure you all get your personal share of the milk bucket. In other words, there's again that sense of union, the power of the union. Very often when times get hard, especially in the start of a gray, cold winter, real joy is best found in the home and the company of others, and I feel this really strongly here in this reading. Both Fehu and Gabo on a personal level again suggest a time to be careful with finances, but also a time that you and yours can personally benefit from the right contracts in the right relationships. Well, the Trap Depression card suggests, for example, this is not a good time for starting up a new business. It might be the perfect time to draw in and look closely at the potential for doing so later when the energies unlock a bit, which they will. Energies are always striving for balance, and blocked periods are always followed by some period of release before swinging back again to repeat the cycle. We have different sort of flavors of blocked and active and inactive energies. They're not always trapped like this one is. I say sometimes they're peaceful, sometimes fast-moving energies have this wonderful air of freedom, and other times they feel really wild and out of control. We don't know what's going to follow this one, but we do know this is kind of a trap period. But it's not going to last. So overall, the tag end of October and the month of November are just likely to be rather gray, depressed, and dark on a macro current events level. But they don't have to be that way on a personal level, as I said. Use the Fehu golden energy. I often think of Fehu as a golden rune to light a warm fire and to keep the gloom at bay. Realize that if you start to feel depressed, this is part of the energy. And I know it's kind of difficult, but you can work instead to sort of make an intentional choice to make this a period of withdrawal, more towards meditation, instead of, just like crying under the covers, or strike up a gaybo partnership and reach out to a close friend or a loved one and just, share with them and spend some time, even if it's just sitting in the same room, reading books at each other. It's that comfort of the other and the comfort of and warmth of togetherness. When we lived in Sweden years ago, late October and November was the time when the stores would fill with candles, hundreds if not thousands of candles. It soon became obvious why, as the dark nights came faster and the days so gloomy they had almost no light at all. The candles lit the gloom in every room and were lit in many families, just simply started the afternoon. As soon as the sun went down, the candles were lit, and they stayed that way until everybody went off to bed. I encourage all my listeners during the next month, if you can go out and get some candles, oil lamps, or ready your fireplaces if you're lucky enough to have them, because I think this sort of natural warmth is going to be very, very helpful. Even if you don't live in the northern hemisphere where the actual weather may be gloomy, I think you're still going to get a backlash even in the southern hemisphere of this kind of dark, gray energy. And candles can help offset some of that gray energy enough that's going to be coursing around you, but you can help use it sort of as a physical barrier. Above all, take comfort in the fact that energy never stays static, as I said before. It changes, and November is just not going to last forever. Even if this one may feel like it may do that for a while, it won't. And the bright colors of the Yule holiday season will be just around the corner. And remember, the various what I call winter solstice celebrations, or summer solstice if you're in the southern hemisphere, but particularly the winter ones, were designed because our ancestors knew that this time of year tended to be dark and gloomy, even without all these energies running all over the place, which is making it worse this year. And so they would, highlight things to sort of make a middle period in this kind of, reign of color against the darkness. And fire and warmth, again, was a very important part of that, as were evergreens and things that created color. So those are other things. You don't want to bring your Christmas or your Yule decorations in too early, but you can sort of, decorate with other things that kind of help in your personal space and your personal fire zone, your personal cave. You can make it lighter. In other words, you want to let the light in that can come in, as opposed to just huddling on the floor in the dark. Well, that was a rather more intense reading than I expected, but I suppose it may also be a reason why I got the push to go ahead and get it down, rather than do another topical show as I'd originally planned. Now, as I said, next week there probably won't be a show. If there is a show next week, there's a slight chance I might be able to get an interview show up. If that happens, then there probably will not be a show the following week, but most likely there will not be a show next week, because on the 31st I'll be spending the weekend, as I said, both doing the outdoor ritual, and I'm going to be interviewing some lovely friends of mine that we'll be staying with, that I think you will enjoy having their future interviews with, as we have time to put them up on the show. Meanwhile, if you get a chance, I think you should listen to this show a second time, because I think there's a lot here to think about. Also, if you have some astrologers or close friends you trust that do astrology, I don't, but I would be really curious as to what the astrological stuff is for this time period, because very often I've noticed they tend to reflect in each other, both the astrology and the card readings. So they might also, particularly if you can afford or know someone who would do your personal chart, that might give you also some more ammunition about how to negotiate the next 5 to 6 weeks. Because I think this whole winter may be a bit strained in the north, but I think the next few weeks particularly they're going to be frustrating because of that trapped feeling, Sometimes the trapped periods are harder to get through just because they seem so long, and then it's always very upsetting and challenging when we go through the fast-moving periods, but at least things are happening and you're reacting as opposed to just waiting for the next shoe to drop. I think because of this, I'm going to try to take one more look at December 2014 before it closes down, to see again what things are coming in towards the Yule season, and then I will hopefully do a full wrap-up of the show for the year sometime in early 2015. We definitely want to do a show with Psychic Focus Lady doing that. And I may do one with her and one on my own, or just, to review things and see what we got right, what we got wrong, what actually happened. And just kind of, and then maybe make a few predictions for the next year as well. Tonight's show is a bit slower and shorter than usual because I'm running late and I need to make sure this reading gets up by Monday so people can hear it. So I'm not going to do a part 2 of this show where I so often do with a personal reading or a topical reading on a subject. I just want to make sure I get this up there. But I hope you've enjoyed our time together. And I'm really looking forward, like I said, to getting some more of those interviews and some guests up for you in the next few weeks. But for now, I think it's time to say goodnight. For Cat's Eye on the Future, see you again next time. You have been listening to Cat's Eye on the Future, the show where we take a look at what's coming up in your world and your future. Join us again next time for another episode of Cat's Eye on the Future.